All right, Mirabai, thank you so much for joining me. How are you doing, for starters?
Oh, it's just a pleasure to be here. It's, an oasis in this strange and time, this kind of desert time of not knowingness. So being here with you is a space of connection with all of you. So I really appreciate it. I'm feeling very happy right now.
Yeah, I really deeply appreciate it. And you were one of the few people that kind of instantly came to mind and heart when all of the panic and stress and concern continues to escalate. And being deep in your book and just continuing to hear your discussions pop up and Joe talking about you and your work, it really does feel your writings, your work, your passions is really medicine for our current times. So yeah, really grateful for all the work you've been gifting us and the energy that you're bringing forth. It really feels needed.
Thank you, Stuart. I feel that way about all of us, certainly the work that you're doing and Joe. And each person who's listening right now has some particular medicine, I feel like, that is vitally needed in these times. And just lest anyone be walking around or sitting still thinking that they have nothing to give. I feel so strongly that each of us carries our unique imprint of our prophetic, task or offering for this world. And in a way, these times enable us to get still enough to maybe tune in and discern what that might be. Like, what is ours to give and do in this world
Yeah.
of be?
Yeah, Joe and I have been talking a lot about that. What a stressful time, but what a precious time to get still. And I was listening to Jack Cornfield the other day speaking about this current situation we're all in and the interesting situation of seekers spending thousands to go on some kind of exotic retreat to get in stillness a lot of the time. And especially a lot of his work is to install that kind of stillness. And we're all being forced into that kind of retreat, which may be a nice opportunity to get still. It may be a nice opportunity to read that book we've been putting aside for so long, or many books. Or it really is a precious time to strip back and simplify and tune into maybe places we've gotten complacent. And I mean, for a lot of people, it must be fucking scary if they've never stopped, if they've literally never stopped with like full attention in the one space for consecutive time. So it'd be nice to speak to any listeners that are finding it really challenging and shit's coming up and their financial situations are uncertain, a lot of uncertainty, a lot of fear, a lot of stress that's valid and totally legitimate. At the same time, can you speak to that trauma, that unknown, fear of the unknown, and breathe some space into it, or whatever comes through you? What are you feeling?
So many things were arising in my mind as you were speaking. Um, well, let's start with the last part of what you're saying, which is, how do we be with the not knowing? Our culture, that is Western culture, by and large, has conditioned us to get away from spaces of ambiguity and paradox and mystery as quickly as possible. And when something like this arises where we really don't know what's going on, our impulse is to fix it and fill it as quickly as possible. And there's something about feminine wisdom that we see in the goddesses across the spiritual traditions and in the teachings of women mystics, which is, as you know, my kind of area of interest, that invites us to actually inhabit these desert spaces, these dark, womb-like, deeply creative spaces of seeming inaction and not knowingness. Ambiguity, liminality, vulnerability. Those are all what I would call feminine spaces. And when I say that, I'm speaking to the feminine in all of us, women, men, people of all genders, and people of no gender identification, who nevertheless yearn for this feminine wisdom that has been, that we've been split off from, especially by the world's religions. Like, I don't know about you, Stuart, but I think probably, and many of us who lean toward the Eastern spiritual traditions, you know, who have an association with a guru like Neem Karoli Baba, as we do, and other Eastern traditions and Buddhist meditation practices and so on, we've often seen those as kind of alternatives to the Judeo-Christian, in some cases Islamic, you know, religious, monotheistic religions that maybe many of us grew up with. And so no, we're gonna go to the East and actually embrace devotion as a path, and the goddess, the divine mother who's worshipped in India and all of that. I mean, I certainly did buy into all that. But as I began to do my own spiritual investigations and starting to intentionally seek out the teachings of the feminine, women mystics and feminine wisdom teachings in general across all the religions that I love, because I love them all, I was noticing that they're also absent in these seemingly alternative spiritual spaces, you know, in the yoga world and the teachings of Vedanta. It's so insidious that we split off from feminine wisdom, that it's somehow threatening, precisely because it's so rooted in the mystery. And the masculine paradigm is all about, you know, rules and regulations and keeping it all tucked in and predictable belief systems that you can buy into and not have to question. So this is a time, I guess, is what I'm saying, where I feel uniquely at home. You know, I'm worried about my vulnerable parents and neighbors and the citizens of this planet who are suffering. I'm deeply concerned. That's also part of the feminine. We worry. We're meant to worry. We're supposed to be concerned about the ones we love, which is potentially, hopefully, everybody. So it's not that I'm not worried, but I also feel like I'm in my zone as a feminine being, a feminine wisdom being, which you are also, and which all of you are. You know, that this is the rich, dark, moist, unpredictable, wild, yet somehow not dangerous to the patriarchy, but not actually existentially, ultimately dangerous. Because if you think about the womb as being the ultimate structure, we are held, we are contained, we are safe within this dark space of unraveling, where we don't know what's going to come on the other side.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. It's so big. It's so, just kind of zooming in to a particular vantage point of whatever we want to call it, the unconscious masculine, or just the contracted small mind, or a whole host of words we could use, but kind of going into that perspective that we could say is the predominant perspective still in our world constructs. It's so scary from that place. And the tension, we're seeing it in the panic buying and people trampling all over the elderly to get that fucking toilet paper. So it seems the process of breaking down those imbalanced unconscious masculine constructs comes with a lot of weird, toxic, anger-filled, panic-filled behavior, which we're seeing that get amplified right now as well. I'm hearing from a lot of experts, it's not the virus we're so worried about right now, it's for lack of a better word, paraphrasing, it's people going mad right now. That's the real concern and buying all the protective medical wear and stealing it in some cases. And so I can assume that a lot of our listeners wouldn't be operating from that vantage point, but there's a lot of that going on right now. And I can feel, even in myself, a little bit of residue of that in my mode as a man trying to protect my family, that kind of ethnocentric, like, I'll do anything to protect my family. So I can kind of relate to that. I don't give a fuck about them. It's all about my tribe. Yet this seems to be a really potent opportunity, and I'm seeing this as well, of expanding our awareness into the world-centric, even cosmocentric, feminine expansion, and finally maybe witness what we've been doing to the earth for quite a while now. And I mean, it's been beautiful, some of the poetry and descriptions of people witnessing what's happened in such a short amount of time, days, maybe for some places weeks, of nature being revitalized through this kind of micro break that we've given to the earth, of people going into their homes and going into wherever they're hiding out for a while, and very quickly nature's been shining and revitalizing, which, that's incredible. Within a matter of days or weeks, the canals are clearing and things are blossoming that haven't in so long. So this feminine energy, I'd love to speak about this kind of correlation between this imbalance from masculine, feminine, and the way we've been treating the earth. And maybe this is a potent time to collectively really see where, even in small ways, where we've been complacent or destructive, and maybe there'll be that ripple effect into the bigger forces at play. What do you think about that correlation?
Yeah, I've been thinking about that for years and writing about it, speaking about it, but here it is in such graphic, vivid form. And so I love that you're bringing up that correlation, and that there is a way in which we have, by exerting our will upon the earth, muddied and clouded and sullied and polluted her, and that what we're seeing is that by being forced to lighten our footprint, this clarity and luminosity is effortlessly happening. And which isn't to say that it's not going to take a lot more than a couple of months of people stepping out of the business as usual to heal the earth, but it is so encouraging to see. So I think there is something about the feminine impulse that contributes to an understanding that less is more, and that lightening our footprint is healing for us all, and is again the kind of domain of the feminine is to kind of not exert our will upon what is, but actually take what is into our arms. Like, that's how I see the brokenness of the world, and the feminine impulse to hold it is not to fix it and change it and get away from it, but to actually feel the pain of the world. So I think we're invited right now to actually experience the pain, the suffering, the fear, the dissolution that's happening. You called it something like I don't remember what you called it, but I'm hearing like death, a dissolution. It's messy. It's messy, and the feminine spirit in all of us is okay with the messiness. We don't need it to be orderly and predictable. And so there is a dying going on. There's a dying of the way we thought things were supposed to be, as a culture. And to me, that's a very exciting time.
Mm.
I was thinking about what you said about Jack Cornfield, and how he was talking about how people pay thousands of dollars to go to meditation retreats or do other kinds of trainings that get us to become familiar with, intimate, friendly with our own minds, and to try to gain some sense of stillness, that stillness between all the cacophony of thoughts. And here it is, we're being invited to voluntarily simplify our lives. Well, it's sort of voluntary. My parents in the late 60s, early 70s, literally uprooted us from our suburban Long Island, New York life, gave away almost all their possessions, and stuck us in a little caravan, and off we went, traveling around the country, the North America actually, and ended up in the back to the land movement of Taos, New Mexico, right, in the early 70s. And we lived in abject poverty. We hauled our water. We didn't have running water or electricity. We hauled our water. All the kids of all ages chopped wood. We built with adobe. We grew our own food to the extent that we could, and dried herbs and all of the stuff, And they were engaged in voluntary simplicity. And it was, well, the kids, we weren't so crazy about it, but we learned to love it. But now what's happening is people are being kind of compelled to give up. And I think that's where all the hoarding and the urge to take care of your people is coming from. It's scary to think about abdicating our privilege and power. One of the things I loved about what you said, Stuart, earlier, is that you recognize I don't know if you said white male, but that's what I read into it, that part of you that is like, I am at the pinnacle of power on this planet. I'm going to take care of my people. And that's, but see, the feminine heart, which I like to think I have, and I think you have, and so many of you who are listening probably identify with this. When I heard you say that, it wasn't like, fucking white male, there he goes with, wielding his privilege. It was like, oh, honey, of course. I wish I could go and accompany you and your beautiful ones home, on the airplane, so that make sure that you're safe. So the feminine heart does not abandon any aspect of the human experience, including those feelings and impulses that might be deemed less than enlightened. Of course we're going to be scared right now. Of course we're going to have the impulses to protect and safeguard and keep away, keep out that which threatens some sense of security. And that too is part of the beauty of these times. And if we can just make space in our broken, open hearts for all of it, I think we will find this new way. Nothing gets pushed away or left behind, including those aspects of our personalities or our culture that seem less than generous. Those too have a place in this heart.
Yeah. Yeah. Speaking furthermore to, I keep just thinking about the responses, the reactions. So say like the typical quote unquote man that's never let themselves cry in their whole life, which I can relate to as well. And this bubbling up of fear that just wants to be expressed, it wants to be held in the way you were just describing. But that armor of the heart that's ever so common, that armor that feels protective, and maybe it's all we've known since birth and however far back as we want to entertain, that armoring of the heart that doesn't even let one shed a tear, let alone feel the fullness of life happening, which is very, very common. So, and I can think of women as well, not just men, women that have inhabited that more masculine way of being,
Yeah.
to thrive maybe in an entrepreneurial sense, or that's just how they've been, that's their trip. And they've become very masculine in their ways and have admitted it's been years. I can't remember the last time I shed a tear. And they like want to, and I can relate to that, like wanting to release and open, yet that dense armor, not allowing that kind of ego fear, not allowing for the release. And I'm sure a lot of people are in that situation right now, going into more debt and trying to take care of their family and going into more debt and not seeing light at the end of the tunnel. And I can't help but continue to relate to both the predicament of just trying to feed either just yourself or the family, at the same time maybe feeling the call to get vulnerable and release and tune into the blessings in disguise right now. For a lot of people, it wouldn't feel like the time, would it? It would feel right now like a survival type moment. So just kind of speaking to that paradox of just trying to get through this time. We don't know if it's going to be another few weeks or another few months, or it's very unknown. So we've spoken a little bit, you have spoken a little bit to being with the unknown. It'd be cool to even tease that apart even more, of maybe some practical ways, someone that's real scared right now, feeling the bubbling up of emotionality and maybe tears, but they're just not letting themselves, because they just got to get through another day and try to provide or try to find that extra bit of money to get through the day, through the week. It'd be nice to really speak to that, because a lot of people are in that situation right now.
Right. Perfect. Because that was the other thing I was going to say about privilege and power right now, is that many of us, many of you who are tuning in, carry some degree of privilege in our lives. You know, many of us are white, and not all of us who are listening right now are white, but many probably are, considering the demographics that I've experienced in most of the spaces where I teach and show up. Not all, but there is a way in which many of us on a spiritual path in the West have navigated with some ease through this world by virtue of our whiteness. Even if we don't have a great degree of socioeconomic privilege, we have some probably. And so in many ways, I guess what I'm saying is it's much easier for us to inhabit this liminal space right now as an opportunity for spiritual practice and going within. And even those of us who have powerfully armored hearts are in a position where maybe for the first time, even in spite of our fear and uncertainty, we actually have the luxury of some space. We're not so compelled by the endless to-do list right now. You know, that list that I say in Wild Mercy is written in fluorescent ink. And right now it's kind of irrelevant, that list. So we have that opportunity to, even if for just a few moments or even seconds at a time, explore the range of feelings that are arising in us right now with curiosity and tenderness, rather than trying to push them away or hold on to the ones we like, to really, not in an objective, non-dual, above it all, spiritual bypass way of exploring what's going on, but deeply entering into our experience in a way that we don't usually have a chance to do. But that, Stuart, and all of you, I know, I mean, I recognize is a privilege. It's a privilege I have. I'm worried about money right now. I'm losing thousands of dollars in speaking engagements and workshops and retreats. That's how I make a living, not with my books, but with teaching. I'm worried about my parents who are in their 80s. I'm worried about all the vulnerable people who are homeless, the immigrants in our community, the immigrant community who are afraid to look for help. So all of that is true, but I rest in a space of privilege. I live in Taos, New Mexico. Right out my window, I'm looking, are the foothills of the Sangre de Cristo Mountains, where I walk every day with my two beautiful dogs who are sitting right here at my feet. You know, I have good, healthy food that I stocked up on at the natural food store. And so I am navigating this time with my privilege intact. My stresses are nothing compared to what many, many people are experiencing, or at least not yet. I know that I don't know what's coming. So like this morning, I was thinking, this was my white privilege popping its ugly head up, but we have to love her too. I was thinking, there are all these people who are sitting on their asses on the couch, binging on Netflix like violent shows, eating potato chips and drinking, soda, and they're going to just squander this opportunity. Like, this was my little inner dialogue for spiritual, whatever. And I was like, Mirabai, shut the fuck up. What do you know? What do you know about their reality? And these mythical people who are going to be sitting on the couch eating junk food and getting fat and ruining their chance of enlightenment. Whatever. It's just noticing those voices that arise. It's very interesting. A few years ago, I'm a grief counselor, and so I participated. I wrote about this in Wild Mercy, my new book, and I was writing about. I was the grief counselor for a restorative justice experiment here in Taos, where a young guy had accidentally run over his girlfriend in the parking lot of a motel where they had been partying, and they were in a fight, and he backed out and killed her accidentally. And so he was in prison, and they were trying to do a restorative justice session to see if they can find an alternative model for sentencing him that included the voices of the community, all the people who are impacted by her death. And when I was called upon to speak as the girl's mother's grief counselor, I suggested to the guy who was there that he use his time in prison, which was definitely coming, as a monastic opportunity, a chance to read spiritual books and to study deeply maybe the wisdom traditions of the world. And I gave him a copy of Dark Night of the Soul, which I had translated. And in fact, I followed up by sending him some of these books along the way. Finding Freedom by Jarvis J. Masters, who was a student of Pema Chodron, who's on death row at San Quentin still. And he did it, he engaged it in that way. Malcolm X did that. Many prisoners, famous and not so famous, incarcerated people, recognize that when you're stuck in this dark place where you cannot move, you have no agency, you could turn to the great wisdom of the world and mine those treasures. But you cannot impose that on people. But I do see that these spaces are arising all over the internet. There's also some mean shit happening too. Like, I've been accused in the last few days of terrible things that seem totally unfair. And I realize it's just people are scared and worried and judgy, and all that stuff comes up. But I see much more than the people knocking over the elderly to buy toilet paper. Much more, I'm seeing this sweetness that comes from stillness, from this enforced voluntary simplicity. And I trust it. Those are the clearing waters of the canals. They're happening in the human community too.
Beautiful. Yeah, I also have been thinking of people that have inspired me. I can't even think of the text, but like things like Anne Frank writing of her time pretty much being tortured, and yet that being the platform for deep insight and contemplation and awakening. And there are so many accounts of people really waking up through those situations where typically we wouldn't think it was conducive for opening our heart and waking up to who we truly are. But it tends to be the case, doesn't it, when we lose everything we're identified with, everything we hold tight to. Often there is that opportunity that of grace just slipping through in mysterious ways. And I'm reminded of when Ram Dass was sharing of his, it's not really correlated, but I just reminded of it then, of when he was up in India and there was catastrophe in Bangladesh, and he wanted to take his mini bus up and save as many people as he could. But Maharaji was saying, don't you see it's all perfect? I mean, you can go, like, you can go try and save, but don't you see it's all perfect? Which, again, I totally agree. We can't impose, like, come on, don't you see it's all perfect? Like, can't really impose that on people, yet there's a mysterious perfection in situations like what we are in now. I can't help but I feel inspired to do what you shared, of what you did as a child with your parents, and just go driving and kind of learn to tend the land and be self-reliant. Because I'm an urban conditioned kid, and no survival skills that I know of, yet I'm feeling this inspiration to learn to survive in a much more grounded way, a much more practical way, in which I hadn't really thought about it much up to this point. Thought, the Amazon will always be there, and iHerb will always be there, and the supermarket will always be there. And it's such a weird trance that most of us have gotten into, of it'll all just be there. And this is a great opportunity of really seeing the impermanence of everything, the chaos of form and the unpredictability of form. Yet, if we can drop into that all-embracing, loving awareness, whether it's so interesting that actually it'd be good to tune into both, like, so the typical masculine way of dealing with chaos, you touched upon it before, is that of transcending it. So tuning into the ultimate truths of nete, not this, not that, it's not real, what's real, it's just one, which is all beautiful. And I love getting into that space. Mm-hmm. And I must admit, before becoming a father, that would be my practice, is to tune into Ram Dass's teachings and teachings from more non-dual mystics, and tune into the I am and the nothingness, really, which was beautiful. And I do feel it is useful. Yeah. Can we speak to that tendency, which has been a predominant method for seekers, is to kind of affirm that this is just an illusion, it's not real, like, get out of your way and tune into what's real. And is there usefulness of that right now? And a more feminine approach to gain insight, and or is it time to really get the rubber to meet the road, so to speak, and merge the two? What do you have to say about that?
Yeah, that one, the third one. Right. To me, it's not even so much, although I have written about it as if it were the masculine paradigm of perfection and purification and transcendence, and the feminine paradigm of embodying incarnational immanence, claiming this world as holy ground. But what I think is needed is this paradoxical third space, where we recognize that everything is perfect, as Maharaji told Ram Dass when the horrors were unfolding at the border in Bangladesh and Pakistan also at the time. And also that the cry for justice is real and actual, and here in this relative world, it is ours to respond. How we respond, however, if we can respond from what I would call the feminine heart, that might look very different from the masculine driven activism model of, don't just sit there, do something. Nor don't just do something, sit there, which was Thich Nhat Hanh's counter message. But there's something in between where we are invited to actually, as I said before, feel the pain of the world in every cell of our body, feel the suffering that is unfolding, not push it away. And then from that place of broken openness, of connectedness, of recognizing our essential interconnectedness, know how to peacefully and in alignment with the sense of beauty and perfection, rise to what is ours to do. And that's why I want to come back to, what I said at the beginning, that I feel like this time of enforced stillness is an opportunity to discern what is ours to do. And it may not be picketing and signing petitions and even feeding people at food banks. It might be something very different from what we are preconditioned to think, our preconceptions of what activism or being of service or offering seva looks like. The arts, it's a time I feel where creativity and artistic expression and art in community, or even if it's just virtual community, is going to be vital medicine for our times. I think that's why all these great poems are emerging right now, for instance, and artworks of all kinds and music. Like, I know this incredible violinist named Vijay Gupta. He's Indian American, and he played in the LA Philharmonic since he was like 19. He was very young. And every morning he's playing a short violin piece, like 2 minutes long, often accompanied by a poem or a passage of scripture from one of the world's mystical traditions. It's very short and powerful and passionate and loving and sad sometimes and playful other times. And it's just like fucking elixir for my soul when I see it. And then there's a lot of garbage that I have to, weed through. But there are things emerging that are healing us in ways that we might not have thought to look to before. So, so many things of what you've said, Stuart, spark other things. So I'm going to come back to one other thing, if I may.
Sure, please.
I'm thinking of the teachings of the Dark Night of the Soul by St. John of the Cross. So that was my grounding. Well, I was not raised Christian at all. I was raised secular Jewish, no religion at all. But
same.
at a very, you too?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, there's a few things in common with Ramdas Maharaji, Jewish kid. Yeah. Keep going, sorry.
So, and so I found, Ramdas and Maharaji at a very young age, 14, and became a devotee of Neem Karoli Baba Maharaji and a student of Ramdas. And all of that was wonderful. And, but I didn't have anything to do with Christianity. So a little bit Judaism, but almost none, just cultural. Jewish on my parents' side, as Krishnadas likes to say.
Yeah.
Sufism, I became very deeply involved in various Sufi lineages. And so Hinduism, Buddhism, Sufism, a little bit of Jewish mysticism came into the mix. Definitely a lot of Native American teachings, mostly because I live in northern New Mexico, where that's prevalent. But very little with Christianity. But along the way, I fell in love with St. John of the Cross, San Juan de la Cruz, the Spanish, 16th century Spanish mystic. Ended up translating his masterwork. Oh, because I was fluent in Spanish from traveling in Mexico as a kid. And then his masterwork, Dark Night of the Soul. When that book, my first book of, a little over a dozen books, came out, many of you know, some of you don't, my 14-year-old daughter, Jenny, was killed in a car accident. Literally the day that my translation and introduction to Dark Night of the Soul came out. And I had to challenge everything that I was presenting to the world. Like, really? And it had a lot to do with enter into the darkness, yield to it, surrender to it. Don't fight it. Don't try to shape it to your own ideas of what should be happening, but yield and surrender and be present. And if you do, you will, that space will open to this vast landscape of the heart where everything can belong. And these teachings, Dark Night of the Soul, or the teachings of non-duality from the Advaita Vedanta tradition, or even my beloved Ram Dass's teachings on cultivating the witness, all of these teachings come from a place of rigorous tapas or tapasya in the Hindu tradition of what's the word I'm looking for, Stuart? Discipline, rigor, you know, austerities. Yes, aspiring, renouncing. So I'm like in the mood to sort of reframe all of these great wisdom teachings through the lens of the feminine that has much more to do with softening the heart and not abandoning any aspect of our experience as being unspiritual or taking us away from, you know, the path of liberation or salvation, but fully entering into the alchemical container of what is. But this comes back to what you said about Jack Kornfield saying people pay for this, you know, but here it is, just being given this stillness, this simplification that is being demanded of us right now. What I found in my grief process, and see if you, those of you listening who've experienced great loss, which is many of us, can resonate with this, that in times of great loss, of trauma, of sorrow, not just the death of someone we love, but any kind of shattering of the foundation of the way things were in our lives, the landscape of our lives, you know, the ending of a loving relationship, or the losing of money or job, or serious health diagnosis, or a pandemic, whatever it may be, that these moments strip us of all the unessential, superfluous stuff that stands between our hearts and a direct experience of reality. And I would translate reality as love. And so what I found in my state of radical bereavement is that I was brought into the very state that I had tried to cultivate in all of those years of spiritual practice. You know, I'd been on a path since I was 14. Jenny died when I was 40. And in one moment, I was made spiritually naked. It was just all taken away. And somehow I had just enough presence, occasionally in the midst of the fire of anguish, moments where I recognized, wow, this is what the mystics are talking about. This is that nakedness of spirit that enables us to merge with the beloved. This is where the lover gets to have the secret rendezvous with the beloved in the garden. Now, I wasn't interested in making love with the beloved. I was interested in having my baby back. But nevertheless, here I was. So here we are. Yeah. We're in this state of dissolution and coming undone and radical unknowing, the mystery itself, direct naked confrontation. We could run from it. We could try to fill it in. And all of those impulses are okay. Mm-hmm. And for little moments at a time, we can taste what it is to fully inhabit the mystery, the beautiful, dark, glorious, unknowing, and whose fragrance is seeping in anyway, whether we like it or not. And if we allow it to, we might notice that that fragrance is enlivening. It's wildly creative, and it's filled with yearning, and also with the opportunity to call out parts of ourselves that have been dormant for a long, long time, including those parts that know exactly what to do to contribute to the healing of our beloved Mother Earth.
Wow. That was powerful. Thank you. I just want to share what I was feeling as you were speaking. I was feeling like tears bubbling up, and I could feel the kind of, again, kind of zooming out to these typical reactions when someone is being so vulnerable and honest and sharing of those dark nights of the soul, that tendency to, again, contract. And I was feeling that, like, it's an intense sensation of feeling like compassion is an intense sensation. And it's like this Shakti, this feminine energy, if either we haven't had conversation around it or training around it, I think it can just easily be labeled as too much, like just or bad, like what is going on here? And even just then, as I allowed myself just to really hear you and feel you, and feel that raw potential of when we're in dark night of the soul, in turmoil, in grieving, the bliss that can really bubble up through it when we allow the expansion, that intense sensation of the longing, of the grieving, of the, even from this vantage point of just observing and listening, a tendency to cut off because it's too much, to fully open my heart to the bigness of life. But when we open up, even though it's kind of like there's a survival instinct that kicks in of armoring the heart, keep it kind of distant, but to open, it becomes a mystical experience. It becomes so mystical and psychedelic and big and blissful, which is so interesting. Because again, we can't impose, like, we can't force that upon another to see the bliss in the shitty situation. And it's a pretty dickhead thing to do to, if someone is grieving, like, yeah, come on, get the grace, which
yeah.
So it's such a, and like you were touching upon before, of like having a moment of judging those that are just slouching on the couch, eating potato chips and watching Netflix all day. It's like, come on. I have moments of that as well, of like, oh my God, what can we, how crazy can we be, and how just selfish and slobbery can we be at the same time? Is that, I don't know, it feels both masculine and feminine to have a kind of a witnessing of it, and then a compassion, a loving of it. It feels kind of both, to kind of zoom out and like witness it, and then just love and be the kind of grandmother energy for anyone and everyone. So like what I like to do is think of everyone as like a little child every now and then, and also that everyone has had a mother, both that like if I'm getting pissed off at someone like Trump or just someone that's really pissing me off, like imagine them as a little kid, you know, and also like their mother and how they were brought into the world, and like try to really get into their shoes. And that's a very simple way that helps me have compassion and come back to a bit more of a childish innocence. That's what helps me anyway.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
Grandma Stuart, we will call you.
But yeah, it is so interesting. And I mean, it could be a whole nother episode in itself, but it seems the unraveling and exposure of a lot of these patriarchal constructs of with the Me Too movement and just the rising feminine of women finally feeling able to speak up, and a lot of these men that have been getting away with just shitty abuse patterns for so long. That there also seems to be correlations with that as well. These old constructs breaking apart. And I think it's a powerful time to also speak to men, because I've had a lot of men come to workshops and private sessions and get very vulnerable and honest about their predicament of dealing with sexual energy and lust and desire. And they're like, Stu, I see you being devoted to your wife and kind of being settled and in love and very present. Like, how do you cultivate that? And men are getting very curious, like either to become empowered in their polyamorous ways and just be comfortable with that and own their desire in that way, or to also become more masterful with their sexual energy and to either like channel it to the one they've chosen, or I'll let you kind of take over with that, because I know a big part of what you have written about and what you speak about, that owning of your desire. Is that how you word it? Owning your desire,
Yeah, I
owning
don't
your
know.
longing?
Desire
Yeah.
as holy, holy desire.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm not the only one, especially the only woman talking about this right now, but I
Yeah.
really appreciate that you're holding that space for men, by the way.
Mm.
And that actually directly connects with what I was thinking about when we were talking about the poor slobs on the couch,
Right.
is that I am also one of the poor slobs on the couch. Like, that too is true of me. I don't just lovingly witness it or spiritually bypass and get beyond it all. I am an embodied being who needs, or thinks I need, time to just hang out and watch Netflix. What am I watching? Outlander.
Oh, is
Watch
it good?
Outlander.
Yeah.
It's like, it's a chick flick, as my
Yeah.
husband,
Yeah.
who happily watches it with me, calls it,
Yeah.
and eat popcorn and drink a glass of red wine. And that's me too. I mean, that I am an embodied being who does not see my sensual self as being an obstacle on the path. That is a masculine construct. Like, men both have intense, overpowering, apparently, sexual desires, as I have had, and also judge that as being a bad thing. Or, well, it is. I mean, it has caused great harm. But what I mean is, the masculine paradigm has both been driven by sensual attachments and done everything in its power to deny the holiness of the body. And that is a fucking confusing message for men and for the women who have been oppressed by that tension. And so my response to that is to enter in to our holy embodiment and to recognize with discernment and tenderness and curiosity that which is life-giving and life-affirming, and that which is violent and oppressive and shuts out life. And so I trust us. I guess I want to say I believe in us and in our capacity to discriminate and to fully embody and embrace our sensual selves with all of their sometimes conflicting desires, and also not weaponize either our impulses or the conditioning to repress those impulses, but to explore them with tenderness and curiosity and compassion, knowing that there is one of us, that's not some kind of abstract philosophical concept of we are all one, but something that we experience when we fully embody what is. Then we have a felt sense of that interconnected web of being to which we belong.
Yeah. Beautiful. Mirabai, I want to respect your time. I think it'd be do you have your book, Wild Mercy, right
Oh,
there? Yeah.
just so happen to have it.
I would love, if you don't mind, to wrap this up. If you could read, actually, I was going to request a particular part of the book, but maybe just flip it open to what you feel would be really nice medicine for right now to wrap up this conversation.
Oh my
If
goodness.
you feel like it.
I would love, I'm just curious what you picked. I also, before we go,
Yeah.
I also want to follow up on this thing about how we have various intersections. You alluded to it, but we didn't get to talk about it.
Well, I don't know how many, but the Jewish thing, the Ramdas thing, the Maharaji thing, I think there might be a couple of other things. It feels like there's more, but there's some strong links that I see a lot in the whole kind of Ramdas community, the Maharaji Ramdas community. There's some pretty interesting commonalities there, huh?
So true.
Yeah.
Yes. All right. So what did you pick, Stuart?
Well, I thought the last chapter where community, let's wake the fuck up. I thought that was, it kind of wraps it all up, and it's a strong but loving call to really rise up together. I really love that. But I mean, the whole book, I mean, you could flip to any page and it's just gold. Really well done, huh?
Thank you.
Mm.
Thank you. Well, I think you're talking about this, which is chapter 5. Actually, it's the middle of the book, connecting the web of community and the web of interbeing.
Okay, that's it.
You think that's it? Okay,
I think that's it.
All right, I will end with this.
Beautiful. Thank you.
Connecting. You're welcome. Let's see. So if I'm looking this way, is that okay?
Yeah.
Or is it better this way?
Get the cover. Get the cover. Yeah. It's such a beautiful cover.
Such a beautiful cover. Oh my God, the best cover I've ever had. This is, by the way, this is Leela Downs, who's an activist, singer-songwriter from Mexico. You feel special. Sometimes this feels like a curse, like no one will understand you, ever. Like you will always be an alien walking among regular humans, pretending to blend in. You have learned to live with this gulf, but what you really crave is community. You long to belong to the human family, to Mother Earth. Participating in the human condition can be bewildering. It's not always cozy and easy. Rather, it's humbling at best, downright humiliating when it's not flowing. It can seem so much simpler to ride solo, slaying your own dragons and singing the ballads you wrote about yourself. Collaboration can be tedious, and the prevailing masculine value system may have conditioned you to feel like you're giving away your power when you share it with others. So what? Give it away. The time of the singular sage bestowing his unique wisdom is over. That was a method devised by the men in charge who sought to regulate wisdom. They taught us to suffer alone in the desert for 40 years, collecting our insights in a secret box labeled esoteric knowledge. Then we were supposed to dispense those insights stingily to those who proved themselves worthy by also suffering alone in the desert for the requisite 40 years. It turns out that this world is filled with special beings, grappling our way through the anxiety of solitary conundrums and tasting the occasional reprieve of connection. When you realize this, your body lets out its breath and relaxes. The curse lifts. You come in from the cold. You hold out your cup, and some other special being fills it with sweet, milky tea, spiced with fragrant herbs. You drink. The way of the feminine is to find out what everyone is good at and praise them for it and get them to teach it to one another. Maybe you know something about the hidden meanings of the Hebrew letters, or how to build a sustainable home from recycled tires and rammed soil, or loving kindness meditation. You the one who knows the Islamic call to prayer, climb this minaret and call us all to prayer. You, the one who knows how to sit quietly at the bedside of the dying, show us the way to bear witness. You, the one who knows how to get us to wake up to the shadow of privilege, please wake us the fuck up. It will be chaotic, all this community building, but your cooperation will save the world. Besides, it will be fun. So it doesn't have to hurt to give ourselves to each other.
So beautiful. Thank you so much. Appreciate you so
Stuart.
much.
Thank you, little brother. And please
And
be safe as you travel home with your beautiful familia.
thank you so much. Likewise, be safe, all the best, and we'll speak soon.
All right. Love to
All
all of
right.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.